Warning.
Some really bad humor coming your way. Prepare yourself. Cardigan, we get into this verse of the day? Okay, alright, yeah, I know. Hang on, here we go, let's go. So if you're still with me after that, today what I want to talk about for our verse of the day is cultivating a foundation from which to launch. What that looks like and how we go about doing that. And for that, we're going to jump back way into the Old Testament with the book of Joshua. And we're going to skip up to chapter 9, but a quick, brief summary of the events thus far. So by chapter 9 of Joshua, we are at the point where he has led God's chosen people into the promised land, established covenant with God, and has led his people on several campaigns throughout the land of Canaan, taking the city of Jericho and utterly destroying the kingdom of Ai. And they did so in such an intimidating fashion. Out of fear of Israel, several kingdoms west of the Jordan would band together to wage war against Israel. However, the people of Gibeon chose a different course. After hearing this news, they instead decided to align themselves with Israel, but they did so in not an all too honest fashion. But even though they fell short in their covenant with Israel, Joshua and his people still honored the covenant because it was the one they had made before God. Now from here, a turn takes place in chapter 10 when the king of Jerusalem by the name of Adoni-Zedek, out of fear of what Israel has done and this new alliance with Gibeon, decides to set his sights on the land of Gibeon with the help of 4 other kingdoms, which leads us to our verse of the day, which is Joshua 10, 6-7, and it says, "The Gibeonites then sent word to Joshua in the camp of Gilgal, 'Do not abandon your servants. Come up to us quickly and save us, help us, because all of the Amorite kings from the hill country have joined forces against us.' So Joshua marched up from Gilgal with his entire army, including all the best fighting men." I think what's interesting here are the spiritual truths and analogies that we can pull from Joshua's response to the Gibeonites. You see, Israel entered into this covenant with the people of Gibeon, and even though the people of Gibeon entered into this covenant somewhat deceptively, falling short even from the beginning on their end, God's chosen people were faithful to follow through. And just like the people of Gibeon, though we tend to fall short in our ability to follow through with our promises to God, when we cry out to the Father, he is faithful and he is just to show us mercy and to show us grace. And just like Gibeon, when we align ourselves with the Lord, surrendering over to him and to his will, we seem to immediately become the target of the enemy. You see, our spiritual alignment with God and his kingdom is a real and present danger to the kingdom of the enemy. When we align ourselves with the light, we become an enemy of the darkness. And you can certainly expect a pushing back. So then, how do we prepare ourselves? Well, for that answer, we have to take a look at God's chosen people in this story and where they stood. If we look at the positionality of where Joshua and God's chosen people launched out from, we can see a spiritual comparison in where we should launch out from in relation to God, and how we should carve out a sacred time in a sacred space and know that from that sacred time and space, God will be faithful to carry us through. In the book of Joshua, this place is called Gilgal. So, Gilgal is significant in the sense that it is the point of entry where Joshua leads God's chosen people into the promised land after God miraculously dries up the Jordan to ensure their crossing. This point of entry represents the entering into of God's promise to his people. Gilgal is also the place that the children of Israel, upon entering the promised land, would be once again circumcised and would celebrate their very first Passover. Now, this circumcision was a representation of the rolling away of the reproach of Egypt, which is also a representation of a re-entering into covenant with God for a reconciliation with the Father, which is to be set free of bondage and to be set apart. Gilgal also serves as a holy and sacred memorial site where Joshua and his people stacked stones as a reminder of the power of God and from where he had delivered them. And just after celebrating the very first Passover in Gilgal, this is when the manna that God used to feed his people throughout their time in the desert would no longer fall, and when God's people would begin to feed themselves from the land that they were promised. I believe the spiritual take here is that there is a time that we are relying heavily on God early in our journey of faith. But there should and will be a time, if we're faithful, that will come where we begin to strengthen in our faith and relationship with God, where we go from being spiritually fed to a place of learning to feed ourselves, to a place where we stand firmly, where we've carved out time with the Father and created an atmosphere of intentionality for an inflowing of His Word to His Spirit within us. This is our Gilgad, the place from which we are to launch. Carving out and creating that time and space to spend with the Father in relationship with Him for the edification of the Holy Spirit within us is so very important, because it's His strength that we lean on. It's His understanding that we lean on, and not our own. And this is the place of identity and purpose, and when the miraculous begins to happen in your life, when blessing and favor come your way. So I encourage you to lean on the Lord. Create time and space with Him. I hope this was an encouragement, and I hope this was edifying. You guys have a blessed one.